Mach 3, give me crew show on 2, 3, and 4.
Cruise line 1, exit 1.
6, 3. Mach 3, give me start line 2.
5 electric. Mach 3. Mach up.
Mach 3, give me start line 1 and crew show on 7 and 9.
Line 1, cruise show 79, Mach up.
Damn, do something. I hate weapons.
Super Ops, line 3, red ball, avionics.
Super Ops. Line 7 is code 3 for light in the gear handle.
Fuck. Hey, so I started a Patreon because frankly, this stuff's getting expensive. Nothing will change the podcast or the blog if you don't subscribe, but if you want early access to episodes, monthly AMAs, episode shoutouts, voting on podcast topics, and all kinds of 20 Years Done gear, head over to patreon.com/20yearsdone. Okay, so today I'm joined by somebody I'm sure all of you know. It's Ashley Grugan, the creator of The Diary of a Mixed Woman. I asked her on today because A, I think she's smart, B, she gives me good insights, and also for this particular topic, I really can't think of somebody else I'd want to have on because she is probably going to disagree with me, and I need her to do that. And I think she's also going to give a perspective that I just kind of lack. But before I even get started, I wanted to bring something that is outside the scope of this page and this podcast, but I would be remiss if I didn't use the platform and the voice that I had to bring attention to it. So after the elections and all the kind of drama with that, I think it's really important to remember that Breonna Taylor was still killed by police officers, and I'm not going to pass judgment on whether the police officers committed murder. Like, that's not for me to decide. But they weren't even allowed to face a indictment because the Attorney General in Kentucky withheld murder as the charges submitted to the grand jury. The grand jury was required to keep secret what they considered, and only after they battled and got a judge to allow them to disclose what they considered did the world at large learn that they were not presented with murder as an option. It was only reckless endangerment or whatever that was for shooting a wall, which really kind of casts a pretty serious pall over, our society at large, where, like, I kind of don't care which one it is, but I want either police to be treated to the regular people judicial system, or I want regular people to be treated to the police judicial system. You can't have these wildly different standards, especially when one of these groups is the one that is the arm of the law, and there's already a massive power dynamic. So, I've had Ashley on for, 6, 7 episodes or something, and she's always, come through and given great insights. I get a lot of feedback from listeners that they like her episodes in particular. And when she sits here, like, I know she's passionate about these things, and I see her signs in the background, and I feel like, it's not, I honestly feel like it's not a political issue that if somebody gets murdered or somebody gets killed, we should figure out if they were murdered or if they were killed, fairly, or, in this particular situation. Right now, we're not even facing that, and we're not even allowed to consider the facts of how that all went down. So that's my quick soapbox, and it's probably not going to be the last time you hear me talk about it, because I'm getting kind of frustrated that her name is no longer being talked about. So
thank you for saying that.
You can also add anything you want to add, Ashley, to that as well.
I just want to say thank you for saying that, because I think it's an important subject, obviously. And something that I feared, and most people who are fighting for social justice fear, is that when the names are no longer trending, people stop caring and forget that this is an issue that Black people face every day, and people of color and oppressed people all over the United States. So I just say thank you.
Yep, absolutely. So today we're going to talk about, and again, this is like almost a continuation of the podcast we did 2 or 3 weeks ago, Chief Matt Sergeant in Social Media, which I really kind of thought would be the end of these conversations we would have. I legitimately thought that. But in hindsight, I also think maybe because there wasn't like a real fallout from that, after like the bow was kind of put on that Monday morning, I don't think there was like real accountability for that, which means now we're like kind of progressing. So I'm going to kind of frame what happened, and then we're going to we're going to spend a lot of time dissecting this. So day before yesterday, a gentleman named Rick Reinierson, who is a retired major, United States Air Force, and in full disclosure, I've known Rick through social media since 2015, I think. He was one of the people that helped me out when I got into some trouble with my command over something small. And he was also a sounding board for me when I was going through some terrible shit. If you read the Smoke Doesn't Always Mean Fire story, he was there in my corner and kind of talking me through procedures and stuff in the Air Force. So I've known Rick for a long time. So I'm also going to state at the outset that I have biases because I know Rick's intent and character, but it's also important that Ashley is talking because she doesn't know Rick, right? Like I need her objective sort of perception. Also, I want to point out that I don't agree with Rick on a lot of fucking things. And I think Rick's an asshole sometimes. But also I'm an asshole sometimes. And I think Ashley's probably an asshole sometimes too, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I think it's also important to note that you can divorce someone who's an asshole from like the facts of this stuff. So what happened was the Chief Master Sergeant in the Air Force posted something on social media about Thanksgiving and being thankful. And Rick kind of came in, kind of came in off the top rope, I'll say, saying, well, I'm thankful the other services are focusing on the mission instead of the Air Force, who's just turning into the Care Force, and made a link to like a Care Bears picture or something. So that was like a snarky, sarcastic sort of, shot, right? And then the comments, the Chief Master Sergeant in the Air Force responded, something to the effect of, Rick, you couldn't be more wrong. I care about the people because it's going to lead to mission accomplishment. And then there's about 74 other comments where it was just like, typical internet debate. I think it's important to note, and I'm going to actually post, I talked to Rick, and he has a capture of all the comments, and I'm going to post all of those running probably as a link with this on the page. And I don't think there's going to be a video posted. We're recording a video, but I don't think there's going to be a video posted. It's just going to be a standalone audio podcast. So I'll just post a link to but the issue is that Rick's first comment and all the subsequent replies that came from it was deleted by the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force Facebook page. And then Rick was banned from commenting on the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force Facebook page. So this is something that I want to talk about. I think it's important to note right off the bat that me and Ashley had a very long conversation before this podcast started, and she had some concerns. Do you want to start talking on those? Do you want to think about them and then start talking about them? I can keep going, or do you want to talk about them now?
I can talk about them real quick because I even wrote them down.
Great. Good for you.
So in the conversation before we started, I told Chris here that regardless of her gender, us being critical of her and critiquing her social media handling kind of plays into the hands of the idea that we are being more critical of her because she's a woman, right? Because even if we say specifically that we're not critiquing her because she's a female, if someone were to do a comparison by numbers, right, and say later on that as a female, she experienced a lot more criticism as a Chief Master Sergeant in the Air Force, and we are a part of that statistic, right? And so, and I obviously I'm a female, I'm feminist, not like a crazy, I don't wear certain hats on my head type of feminist, but I'm a feminist. And so I don't want that message. I don't want people to take this message as it just so happened that we both started our blogs when we got out of the military. And at the time we have a female who's a Chief Master Sergeant in the Air Force. And so that's who we can talk about, because we were active duty before. And then my other conversation was, or one of the other points that I wanted to make, very similar to how the way that I saw it was very similar to how the whole Aunt Jemima thing happened in the Black Lives Matter movement, right? So the focus is the policies and the structural racism that applies to America today. And it got off topic when everyone was really hyper focused on the Aunt Jemima conversation, which is a part of the problem, but doesn't fix the problem as a whole. So what would this conversation particularly do? Are we detracting from what she's trying to do? Are we detracting from the message that she's sending about, unity and taking care of our airmen and so forth and so on? So I wanted people to know those were some of the concerns that I had. But I think you opening it up the way that you did really gives us the opportunity to dissect that and let people know that we're really critical of how the situation was handled, because she is the highest ranking enlisted member in the United States Air Force. And so she sets the tone when it comes to responsibility and when it comes to being, basically the ultimate supervisor.
Yeah. And so I want to start with your two concerns before we even get into the bulk of the conversation, because I want to address that, because I don't think I don't think the listeners can approach the bulk of the conversation until we frame those 2 points, right?
Yep.
So going to the first point about, like there is, for me, especially after you brought it up, which is also a specific reason why I asked you, and we had that conversation as well. Like, I value your input because of your gender and because of those experiences. And it very much goes back to that women in maintenance. One of the very first videos I did, which was before it was even a podcast. It's like, I don't know the experience of women in maintenance. Like, I can kind of see it, but I don't know. And one of the things I really realized in that discussion was, never in my time in the military, when I was saying, I think it's the fuel control, not the fuel shutoff valve, and someone's like, we're going to do the fucking fuel shutoff valve. Never in those times would I go, I wonder if I was dismissed because I'm a woman and they just don't think women know maintenance, or, that, right? Like that never had to fucking happen to me. And this is kind of similar. Like, I'm acutely aware that I'm being critical, but I'm not going to say I'm being critical of Joanne Bass, because I'm not. I don't know her. Is the reality. Like, I don't fucking know her, and she might be terrible, but she also might be fucking amazing.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't know yet. But all I'm critical of is how the office is currently being run. And as me and Ashley said in the beginning, and obviously PA people don't listen to this, because this will be the third time that I say I'm in a PA group on Facebook and I watch PA people talk. But I think our PA team is fucking trash. I think they are filtering stuff going to her, and I think she is being insulated from criticism. And part of this discussion is, like, much like if you go back to my toxic leadership conversation with Scott Frisco, like, criticism and accepting, like, responsibility, it's fucking really important to making the right decisions, being accountable, and then understanding your real and true impact to the world around you. And if the negative things never make it to you, either that's your fault or stuff that you have the power to, like, fix, if you don't see the bad and you're only spoon fed the good, like, that's not a good fucking place to be at all. So again, I don't know her, and right now I assume everybody's a good person until I'm shown otherwise. And I am acutely aware, especially with my interactions with their PA team, that I just truly don't think criticisms are making it to her. And I think it's to protect her, and I think it's handicapping her in her ability to function. And I will also say, I was not hypercritical of Chief Wright. And I don't know if that's because he built up a lot of stock with the Force when he was kind of swinging out the gates initially, killing a bunch of stupid shit. But the reality is, the suicide problem absolutely began under his tenure. And he very well might have been fucking late to the game to get that fixed. So I don't know if I wasn't critical of him because he had already built up stock, or if it's just like an implicit bias in me that I assume he was better. But I will counter that with, I think Cody was trash from start to fucking finish.
I was going to say something about that.
And I vocalized multiple times in office settings to airmen. Like, maybe I wasn't the best, but it was like, that guy's a fucking moron. I don't know how the fuck he got there, and he's making the world worse just for what the fuck he's doing. So
I was going to say, because that has a huge impact, because when you go from a not so great leadership to all of a sudden a guy who's coming out the gates and is just like tackling these major issues that people have been crying for, not crying as in like we're just emotional.
Crying out for, I hear you.
It's like basically what you would consider a national outcry within the Air Force. And then he comes in and he changes all those things. And while he does talk about suicide prevention and the impact that it has on the force and so forth and so on, and he was a huge preacher of resiliency.
Yep.
but not much changed with the suicide. In fact, a lot of things got worse under his tenure,
Yes.
like you're saying. And then we get, I think the other part of us not criticizing him nearly as much either was we were also active duty. Like, it was easy to be critical of Chief Cody because it was just so hard to read the things that he was doing, for people or whatever. And I put doing in quotes for those of you that are listening. The things that he was doing for people, and then being able to compare that with Chief Wright, and he's doing all these great things. And while you're active duty, all you see is the good stuff.
And I'll tell you what, and that's a great point. We hadn't talked about it before. I'm really glad you brought it up that way, or at least it triggered something in my mind. The reason Chief Cody sucked is because he was divorced from what the field was experiencing and what they could tolerate, what they could handle.
Mhm.
That was the thing. Like when course 14, course 15 of you can't promote and you can't re-enlist and you get this shit done, drop down when you're, especially in maintenance, we're in the middle of just struggling, much like when I talked about with Jason Ryan a couple episodes ago. He predicted the force going to be like a giant fuck you. And it was great. It was like, I loved every single staff sergeant and tech sergeant out there. It was like, I'm cutting the strings. I'm not fucking doing this anymore. And this whole experiment of the Air Force can fucking implode when you kick all of us out. I don't give a fuck anymore. I'm not doing your dumb shit.
Yep.
Right. So the real problem with Cody is he was divorced from what the fuck was going on in the field. And then Chief Wright showed up, and I don't know how he got this field information, but the fact that he just turned the important shit off immediately at great like professional risk and critique from prior Chief Master Sergeants of the Air Force. I mean, I'm assuming that was how he got the force to like rally behind him, because he was like, this stuff is fucked up and I'm going to use my power and my authority to make your lives better immediately. And I understand what the lowest level staff sergeant is struggling with, and I'm going to start fixing that. Right.
Yeah.
And that's really what goes into this conversation. Is my concern is that Chief Bass doesn't know she's slowly being removed from the issues at the force, and I don't want her to be a Chief Cody.
Mhm.
Now, I think there's characteristics with Cody, but I don't know if he was just highly insulated and just removed from knowledge, which left him ignorant. So he was making leadership decisions in an information vacuum, or worse, an echo chamber of everything's great,
Mhm.
which is like not a fucking place to be. I don't know if he was dumb, of low character, or he was just set up with poor information. But the concern here is, my concern is Chief Bass is also not getting the real information. So this podcast is not an attack on her as a person, her gender, as a senior NCO, anything. This is the feedback from the field. You have to see this. And interestingly enough, in like a weird Inception sort of way, this is feedback about how she gets feedback.
Yeah.
Is really what this is.
Yeah.
For me, I don't think gender plays a role, but I also recognize it could. So like I'm trying to like make peace with that and try to be as objective as possible. And what was your second point again? Just because I don't want to make sure I
detracting from the main issues. You know what I mean? Like Aunt Jemima pancake syrup versus changing redlining policies.
Right. So I guess so the question is us spending an hour and a half talking about social media, is the Chief Master Sergeant in the Air Force having to stop what she's doing to address a person that was blocked or banned on social media, and a potential ensuing lawsuit that's going to come of that for civil liberties violation? Is that going to take time away from her? And I think the answer is yes, it does. But it's like, the point of this is how you avoid these things. You're going to have to like create a noisy system, much like what Vic Mora talks about.
I like how you said it earlier before we started recording, when you were like, it's not a problem until it becomes one, basically. And so if we attack it at the lowest level, when it's a small thing that can turn into something larger, I think that kind of helped me feel a little bit better about doing this conversation.
Right. Also, and it also goes back to, I wish this would have been learned after the Bass.
Yeah.
This is an evolution of that, which is, this kind of, again, I'm phrasing this as, there's good intentions here of, I think the Chief Master in the Air Force and her team, her office or whatever, is concerned about abuse on social media, toxicity, bullying, trolling, all these sort of things, which it's problematic because trolling is a very nebulous term. It's really subjective to what you feel is trolling. And that's not a good place to be,
Right.
because, dissent, critique, criticism, those could all, if you're in ego protecting mode, that could be seen as trolling. Like, how many times do you see me, either as a private individual or me on my Facebook page, go onto her page and like criticize?
Yeah.
I guess the question is, am I trolling? I don't feel that I am, because my goal is I want to make shit better. But if you're on the receiving end of that, and I come back week after week after week after week because I'm not getting a response and I'm not getting movement on the shit I care about, am I harassing? Am I trolling?
Yeah. I mean,
Super
that's
subjective.
kind of what I was like trying to sort of suggest when it came to his comments earlier when we were talking about that. Like, it was 75 replies or 75 comments in that chain, that comment thread on that one particular post alone, right? And so
Right.
everything, and I don't agree with what he said,
Yep.
but I agree with his First Amendment right.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And so I 100% support that. And, you know, whether it's valid criticism or not valid criticism, is still an opinion that she needs to hear about, right?
Right.
Because if one person thinks this way, it's quite possible that another person will as well. Same thing with the opposite. But in the comments, because he just kept going and going and going, and I was like, to me, if this was on my post, I would say this person is a troll.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And so at that moment, I was just like, why won't you just shut up? Like, okay, we get how you feel. But then it's like, again, you know, the whole First Amendment thing, you know, he has a right to say his piece, and he was defending himself, and he's a very eloquent writer.
Oh, I'm gonna edit that out. I can't tolerate Rick being told he's fucking eloquent. I won't. No, I just can't feed his ego. I can't feed his fucking ego.
That's fair.
But
he was respectful.
He was.
You know what I mean?
And the way I read it, like, the first comment was snarky, and a lot of his replies after that was just going back and forth with other people that were doing ad hominem attacks, like questioning his military service. You know, at one point they made fun of the fact that his wife outranks him, which, by the like, he doesn't.
There was
fucking
only
care about that.
one conversation within that, and it was I think it was a female, and you know, she was the one that asked, you know, about his bio. Then he posted his bio, and she was like, oh, you have a very interesting bio, and he was like, thank you. And, you know, there was constructive conversation in that, and I feel like if there was more of that happening, maybe his replies, you know, that whole comment chain wouldn't have been deleted.
Well, that's fair.
Not that
but I would
on
say,
him, obviously.
Right. I would say if there was an issue, like, certainly there was somebody that popped up and said, hey, he needs to experience violence.
Yeah.
So that way he understands how he needs to talk to Chief Master of the Air Force. Like, you're talking about, like, implied. So, and the real issue here, by the way, is, like, there was, like, I don't want to tip the hand too much. They're like, that was like an active duty, and I'm certainly not trying to dox this guy. That was like an active duty military member that said to Rick, hey, somebody needs to show you some violence so you understand respect and you speak to the Chief Master of the Air Force the right way.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to frame that this is a gentleman that made a veiled threat and implied that Rick needs to get his ass beat so he knows how to treat her with respect, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's crossing a line a little bit. But what's interesting is Rick's entire comment thread was deleted to include that threat of violence, and Rick was banned from the page, but that individual wasn't. Like, that individual can still post on the page. So, like, what was the reason for the ban? So if you
and this guy is also now being rewarded for.
Right. So, like, if you go to the Chief Master of the Air Force Facebook page under additional information, it talks about, like, that kind of rules. And those are pulled right out of AFI 35107 about social media for public affairs, except for the bottom. It says, we reserve the right in our sole discretion to terminate your access to this forum for any reason with or without notice. So I'd like to point out before we get too far into this, I'm not a lawyer and I'm not capable of giving legal advice, but I fucking highly doubt that particular statement was run through Air Force JAG, because that's basically saying that we as a page can delete anyone at any time for any reason without notice.
Yep.
So let's get into I guess the first issue is people are arguing that this is Facebook and it's not, you don't have a right to free speech on Facebook. So that's like the first sort of note people are going to make. Okay. You're absolutely right. Like, if Facebook had deleted that comment, Rick could not sue Facebook for a First Amendment violation because they have their rules. Rick agrees to those rules and it's deleted. But Facebook didn't delete and ban him. The page did. So like that's not a private thing. These are military members, government officials that are our taxpayers are paying for, and they have removed Rick's ability to engage in protest of his government, period, on this medium, right?
Yep.
Now, uh, people are going to say, well, he could email her, he could do all these things. Okay, those are probably all valid points, but unfortunately, multiple federal jurisdictions have ruled that average citizens cannot be banned or blocked by government officials on their Facebook page. And not even Facebook, like there was a case, and I'll probably link a lot of these so you guys, whoever's listening, can read them as well. It'll be on the 20 Years Done Facebook page, so you have to follow me there to see it. And if I don't like you, I'll ban you for no reason at all whatsoever. I'm just kidding. Like there's some people on my page, I'm like, this guy's a fucking moron. I just keep letting him talk. I'll just argue with him, or I'll just disengage, but I'm not going to ban anybody.
Yeah.
But Donald Trump, his real Donald Trump Twitter account, which was when he became POTUS, he started blocking people who call him like that would disparage him, and I'm talking about some like really vile, like hurtful things, like really terrible things, like not necessarily threats to his life, but it was like, you know, implying some really poor character sort of issues. The federal court said he cannot block people from Twitter, even on his personal account. So it's also important to note that Chief Bass has a personal Facebook page and she has a professional Facebook page. And the way this court ruling says is she wouldn't even be able to block people on her personal page if she uses it for professional or public messaging.
Yeah.
Right. But clearly, a Facebook page with a blue check mark that says this is the official Facebook page of the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, and the words are 100% hers, and then it's categorized as government official.
Yeah.
I think it'd be hard pressed to say that this is not a government account and it's a public forum. And while Facebook can delete comments on there if it violates the terms of service, the page itself cannot delete any comment even though they quote unquote reserve the right, which is that's stupid. Like you can't reserve the right to infringe people's rights. I'm sorry, that's just not how this fucking work. That's not like that's not good. Like this is going to be problematic. And you know when this hit, I was like there's a very short window to like avoid something bad, and it goes back to very much what you were saying about the Aunt Jemima thing. Like I don't want the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force to expend energy, time, and resources defending actions on social media. That's stupid. I need my Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force fixing the big shit that's making people kill themselves. Like that's what I fucking need.
Yes.
Period.
Absolutely. But and that speaks to the reason that we're having this conversation is because if she doesn't take this criticism and move forward, then, you know, how is she going to be able to handle these types of situations in the future? Is it going to get worse? Is it going to get better? Yes. Has she learned from the Bass versus Base? Is she learning from this one? You know, like if she's not able to figure out how to handle her social media accounts, it's going to continue to detract from her mission.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
And I'll also say, like, I don't know if she knows these things.
Yeah.
And I really think she's insulated. I think she doesn't know.
That's something that really needs to be explored, because I know in the last one that we did, when you posted that conversation, you know, you posted like the email thread information that you asked very specific questions that were not answered. They had the opportunity to clarify these things. She's had plenty of opportunity to clarify what's going on. And if she really is insulated because of her PA team, then that needs to be addressed, because if these types of things keep happening, it will continue to detract from her main mission.
Yep. And also I also want to make like really clear, like much of what me and Ashley kind of maybe intimated at the beginning of this conversation, like I don't fucking agree with what Rick said.
Same.
Like I agree with the chief's response where if we take care of our people, the mission will happen.
Absolutely.
Like, ideologically, I disagree with Rick.
Yeah.
I think he's wrong.
Like fundamentally, I disagree with him wholeheartedly.
Right. I think he has good intentions.
Yeah.
Like I don't doubt his intentions. I just doubt how he's approaching it. Right.
Yeah.
And I doubt his perspective. I don't think he's right. But you don't get to just defend the speech you agree with. Like that's the problem, because what is agreed can shift over time. Like, you can't say, oh, that's bad speech. I don't agree with that point. If I don't agree with that point, I need to attack the point. I need to show Rick why he's wrong, which, by the way, I've been going back and forth between Rick, and like part of his commentary is he's gonna he intimated to me that he's gonna also take up the banner of veteran suicides, because I sent him a bunch of stuff I'm working on, and he made a good point. I can't remember if when we were supposed to talk about it, so I'm just going to talk about it right here because it's convenient. But like, the PA and the recruiter piece together, when someone walks into a recruiter's office and they say, I want to be an F-16 crew chief, do they have any fucking inkling that there's maintainers killing themselves at a really high fucking rate?
Mm.
And shouldn't they fucking know
Mm-hmm.
before they pick that job?
Mm-hmm.
Shouldn't that be like, it's interesting because we're asking the Air Force recruitment to work against their goals.
Yep.
We have a hunger for crew chiefs. We need to get crew chiefs in here. Okay, well, let's get these many guys, and they have to go. Okay, yeah, crew chiefs kill themselves at double the rate of finance or whatever comparison it is, and there's the highest rate. Them in security force, the highest rate of suicide. And then the recruits go, well, what do you mean? Like, well, what are you guys doing about that?
Yeah.
And they'd have to fucking answer the goddamn question.
Yeah.
So like, that's something that Rick kind of brought up to me in passing. He's like, it's bullshit that this information isn't readily available for people to, because then you sign a contract and you're fucking stuck.
Yep.
Like, you're trapped.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not really trapped. We talked about how you're not really trapped, but you feel
You
trapped.
kind of are.
But right. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. Because if everybody's like, fuck it, I'm going to get out, at some point, they're going to stop us and be like, no, you're not allowed to get out. You got to fucking stay in.
Yeah.
But I guess going back to the point, like, I don't agree with Rick, but I still think he should be able to gauge in conversation with the chief. And by the way, if the chief has a strong point, like, she can address it. She can quell his sort of fears. She can like, and she should care.
I commend Chief on her PA team's response, their initial response to his comment. Yep. Because, they were like, we disagree. It's important, like what you said, to take care of the people. If we take care of the people, then the mission will be able to,
Yep.
It's obviously, it'll be better.
I suspect, just because I've known Rick for so long, he was seeking to create a conversation, which he ended up getting. And in that conversation, once you kind of remove the sort of vile sort of people jumping in to attack his character or whatever, and there were a few like good conversations within there that added to the value of it. And I just think that deleting the whole comment, the reality is, and going back to what we were talking about, the reality is, I think her PA team, I don't know if she's given her PA team the license that they've been using. And I think what they're doing is they're operating in her name. And I don't think it's good.
No.
Because it goes back to the point we made in the last one. Like, her job, her whole fucking job is to maximize her access and availability to the field to learn issues that she needs to up channel to her boss.
That's the whole reason why they have a social media account.
Well, we'll also get into the real reason why they have a social media account.
The promoting and all that crap. Yeah, obviously. But, you know.
And if you take the totality of the behavior on social media, where she comes down really heavy-handed on the Bass thing, which we already dissected on the last one. We also kind of pointed to the fact that we've heard that wasn't her.
Yeah.
That was her PA team that took those actions. I don't know if that's proven yet. That's just what I've heard. So it's rumor at this point. Don't take it as the gospel.
I think that's also important to say. I wanted to expand on that. Like, this is obviously based on speculation. We don't know why that comment thread was deleted, but perception is reality. And so if we're not being explained to why it was deleted and why that action in particular was taken against him, then we are left with our own devices. So all we can do is assume at that point.
That's fair.
That's very fair. I wanted to say that out loud.
Especially through the lens of, we reserve the right in our sole discretion to terminate your access to this forum for any reason, with or without notice.
Yeah.
So like, when you have that statement at the bottom, which isn't codified in AFI, which means this page has created a rule beyond the scope of an AFI. And it's also important to know that AFIs are reviewed by the JAG to make sure they comport with like the Constitution and what's legal and not legal. Mm. Like, when you're talking about like Air Force, I mean, even local base instructions, that has to go through the local JAG to make sure the commander isn't doing something that's against the law. And you're talking about the Air Force wide AFI, they had like really good fucking lawyers like pick through and make sure everything that they were requiring was within their authority and was not unconstitutional. And when this page throws on we reserve the right for anyone, anytime, for anything without notice, which is beyond the scope of what the lawyers that review the FI determined. And you're right, we don't know the motivation, but when they implant that statement as a catch-all, that creates the perception that that's the rule they kind of enacted, especially when you look at Rick's comments and you run it through the rest of the stuff. Like, was it threatening? No. Was it abusive? No. Was it harassing? It was the first time he made a comment? No. Was it defamatory? No. Libelous, deceptive? No, no. Invasive to another's privacy? No. Torturous? No. Or explicit language? No. Like, he didn't, it wasn't racial, abusive, hateful.
Yeah, he
Like,
didn't violate any of the other rules.
So, like, by process of elimination, I think the comment was deleted because it was a dissent to what they were doing.
But also,
that's what I'm left with. I don't know the answer, but that's what I'm left with.
I'm also going to put in there another option that possibly, because of how much attention that it was getting, because of and all the things that were being said on it, I feel like, because I've seen that in conversations before too, where whoever the original poster was, like if it's Chief Bass's page, and they see that a conversation is getting out of hand, they'll delete it and then turn off the comments because they're like, y'all need to chill the hell out and figure out how to settle your differences or whatever, because it's nothing's being done at that point. Nothing's conducive to like a real conversation and problem solving or whatever the fuck. So I just wanted to put out there that could also be, because we're going off of speculation. We don't know exactly why that comment chain was deleted, but there's more than one possibility. But I mean, it all boils down to something very similar.
I'll give you that it's a possibility. I would counter with the Bass or Bass comment was over 900 replies and over 1,000 reacts, and it's still there.
Yeah, but this one in particular had veiled threats in it, and there was, there was some other language that was brought into this comment chain.
Which you could also delete those reply by reply. Yeah. And I didn't look through the entire Bass or Bass comment thread of the 900 or something comments.
Yeah.
There might, either way, I think I will concede that it's a possibility. I would just say the possibility, as of what we know now, is pretty remote. I also want to go back to like the idea of it's a stupid thing to sue, because he's going to do a lawsuit. Like that's what he's going to do.
I don't think it's stupid. If that's something that you really believe that you need to go to court for, then do it. Well, and we both know that he has the credentials and the support of someone that he would basically win that case. If you guys look at the bio,
it's more of the tenacity, I'll say.
Oh yeah,
because Rick, he has spent a lot of this isn't like frivolous. I'll say that it's not frivolous. It might seem small, but much like we talked about at the beginning, I would rather the small stuff go to court than the big stuff, because very often when it's big stuff, the court will consider, again, not legal advice. And I'm actually not a very good law student, so like take this with a fucking grain of salt.
But if you're looking at the general theory of operation when it comes to law,
yeah, right. So like, very often, it's not supposed to be this way, but like when I read these cases for law school, the court isn't supposed to consider an outcome when deciding like the law, but very often it is the judges are seeking an outcome, and it's usually because the person appealing is just of really poor fucking character, and they killed someone, they killed 10 people, they were selling drugs that were tainted or whatever, and the issue is not that they were selling drugs or anything, it's that the search was dubious. Like the police beat a confession out of them, like that's a great one. Like police beat a confession out of somebody and that's what gets them convicted, and then it's like they want to throw out that, and then the courts are like, yeah, but he really did do these things, and like the confession helped get him convicted, and if we overturn that confession, then this murderer is going to be out on the streets. And even though that fact is not supposed to sway the court, I mean, this is a hypothetical, but very often you see the courts reaching a conclusion they want to reach because of the particular aspects of this case they find really, unsavory. But what happens is much like we talked about in the beginning, when a guy jumps a turnstile and the police beat a confession out of him, he doesn't want to fucking spend the $50,000 to go to court on that. And the judges would be a lot more inclined to consider the constitutionality and the validity of that interrogation, like whether it should or shouldn't be, because worst case scenario, if they overturn the confession, then New York City lost a subway token. And that's like really low sort of threat. But those cases never get to the courts because no one's willing to spend $50,000 to offset the cost of a 25-cent token.
Right. And something else is, we have to talk about how it sets a precedent. And when legal precedent is set, that completely fucks people until another precedent is, unless the Supreme Court comes down with something completely different. That's the precedent that they're going to continue to use to allow fucked up ways of getting people convicted.
Right. So to those that say, I think it's really stupid that Rick's going to file a lawsuit over getting his comments deleted, you need to recognize that Rick is not emotional. He's not upset. It's not a tantrum to him. And I'm speaking for him. And he's very probably going to make comments on this. And I encourage him to, especially if I get something wrong. Like, this is not about his feelings being hurt. And he's probably looking at spending a shitload of fucking money on this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, legitimately.
Yeah.
It's about, he thinks that we as tax-paying citizens of the United States should not be silenced on an official government page when we don't agree with how they're running the Air Force, which, by the way, I'd like to point out, I fucking do that all the fucking time.
Yep.
This podcast is a critique of the government. When I post on her page, it's because I don't agree with the decisions she's making and I'm concerned about the force. And more importantly, like, a lot of the people listening to this, you're active duty. And you know what you can't do? You can't do what me and Rick are doing.
Same.
You can't, right?
Yeah.
So you're already, look at the Bass thing. Like, that kid with silence, he doesn't have, I mean, he might, but he probably doesn't. He doesn't have a good First Amendment claim to that because A, his comment wasn't deleted, and B, it was like a professionalism piece. So the average military member doesn't get to go on the Chief Master Sergeant Air Force page and say, hey, you're fucking it all up. You're making it worse.
Yeah.
Stop it.
Yeah.
They don't get to. It's left to us on the outside. And also, if I'm wrong, if me and Rick are fucking way off, like, Rick, I think you're fucking wrong on the whole Care Force thing. But yeah, fucking make the comments. And if anybody thinks I'm wrong on my comments, then reply to mine. Go on my page and say, hey, you're fucking way off bat. I was just talking to a gentleman the other day, and he's like, you're not quite right on some of the stuff in maintenance. I'm like, okay, well, we'll back channel stuff to me and we'll talk about it because I don't want to be wrong and portraying the wrong stuff. But we are a medium for the active duty service people still serving, that if you can tell us, certainly me, I can't speak for Rick, but you can certainly tell me, fully confidential, I'm not even worried about it. You can tell me, I will take that information. I'm not going to twist your words. I'm not going to do anything else, and I will regurgitate it to her on her page if it's something fucking really important.
Absolutely.
And so if you guys are already, all you people serving are already barred from negative dissent commentary because your supervisor's going to see it, your shirt's going to see it, she might ask you to fucking call her on Monday or whatever the fuck's going on, like, you're chilled in what you can say, that leaves the rest of us. Now, do you want me and Rick to talk about our concerns with the Air Force? The people that recently, me, Rick, and Ashley, and Jim, and Kevin, and Vic, and Stromsky, and all these people I'm talking to that recently served, that can give a voice to what the fuck's going on, because we can now. Do you want us to be silenced because it's critical? Because that's what this is. Rick was critical of how they're running the Air Force as someone that has Air Force experience, that can speak up when people in the military can't, because she's already created an atmosphere. When I say she, again, it's important to note, I'm talking about her PA team generally. But again, if she gave them the marching orders, then yes, she is responsible. But I suspect her PA team is fucking like drunk on power or something. And that's, I don't have much from that besides my disdain. But we are the voice. And you can make an anonymous account, maybe, even though specifically 35107 says you can't make an account portraying you as somebody else. Mm-hmm. Like, it's really fucking bad and restrictive. Like, you need people like us. And if we're getting shut down for the dissent, then it's all echo chamber at that point.
Yeah.
I know I was talking for a really long time.
No, I'm like, there's nothing for me to say on top of that, because I completely agree. And so that's, for those of you that are listening, Chris and I really did have like an hour-long conversation about whether or not we should do this because of how I felt. And correct. Everything that he just said is exactly why I feel like it's important to have this conversation about this, because of the potential effects that it may have that trickle down eventually. Because if it turns, Rick Ryan is getting blocked on Facebook, who's to say that Chris McGee isn't next? Who's to say that I'm not next? And we are the people who constantly, and not that we're looking for praise, But I get on a regular basis a thanks from people because we are saying the things that they can't say out loud. Right.
Correct.
And so if this guy is being blocked from being able to do those things, regardless of whether you agree with him or not, that it closes off the ability to have a discussion about it.
Yes.
And so that's why I agree with his First Amendment right. I don't agree with what he said. So where's the room for growth?
So that brings me to a second point I want to make. And again, this is really kind of divorced from the Chief Master of the Air Force. And I'll tell you what, also, if there's a PA person out there listening to this, first of all, I know there's not. He already would have dined me out on the PA group. I know I keep harping on that. But at some point, really what I'm using the fact that I mentioned I'm in a PA group as a watermark to figure out when the fuck I've actually made it as like a podcaster. Because when I finally get dumped from that group, I know I've excelled outside the
Absolutely
aircraft maintenance community. But
that's better than a top fan badge.
So I have a lot of problems with PA, and I think there's a fine line between messaging and promoting to propaganda. I really fucking do. And one of the important parts of that is you have to allow the bad stuff into the conversation with the good stuff. And when it comes to social media, it's great that you get instant access to a huge amount of people. I mean, I think the chief has like 153,000 people following her. That's 153,000 people that her PA team gets to put out and show pictures of her loading missiles, of her talking about veteran suicides, of doing all these things and engaging. But it's not just a positive mouthpiece. You don't get to engage in social media and then only get to enjoy the benefits of it for your messaging, for the good stuff, without, there's a cost. As a PA, there's a fucking cost here.
Yes.
If you want to engage with the public, you got to be ready for the accountability with how you're treating the sons and daughters of these fucking people. And you don't get to just blast all these great stories that make the Chief Master on the Air Force look good and show that she's a woman of the people and she's out there doing things without also understanding that someone like me is going to come along. Like I did it fucking today on her page. She showed this senior airman that was, a crew chief at Shaw standing there with a fucking badass stash. Good for him. And, she said he loves being a crew chief. He's been doing it 3 years and he likes to turn wrenches. And my comment was, did you ask him about parts availability? Did you ask him when he has time to work out? Did you ask him, does he have time to recharge his batteries? Did you ask him how the SecDef 80% mandate might have reduced his ability to do OJT because they're trying to get jets fixed and meet that mandate? Did you ask these questions? And then I followed up with, did you expect a senior airman to volunteer this information, even though he was handpicked for a DV tour and we're all taught that you don't talk about the bad stuff when a DV comes by without like career impacts? That's the accountability piece. You can do the positive piece, but you also need to be able to explain how you're leading the force. And you don't get to block out the bad stuff and only keep the good stuff. That's not how the fuck this works. If that's what you want to do, then you have the usaf.mil Chief Master on the Air Force page where you can post your fucking articles with no comments turned on. And that's just how you get to do it. You don't get to engage, period. Too bad. That's how it works. But you're on this medium, you don't get to fucking navigate this perfect sort of encounter where only the good stuff's touted and the bad stuff isn't. It's not fair.
I had a thought. So like Chief Wright, like we talked about this earlier in comparison, was his PA team just as bad? Can we honestly say that we know?
Yeah. Well, I don't know of him blocking anyone.
Me neither.
But that's also because they might not have like filed the suit. Again, like I don't know if this has been going on for a long time. Like I don't know. And you know how does it change? It might be this PA team's like, yeah, we've been blocking people since fucking 2013. What the fuck's the problem here?
Yeah.
Because no one sued.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. They could.
I'm just curious because like this goes back to my being hypercritical of her versus other chiefs. We have platforms now where we can talk about it, obviously. So,
yes.
That's kind of where I was going with that. Like, I'm trying to remember because I followed Chief Wright. I followed his page, but I wasn't on it on it. But I did follow all of his tours. So anytime he went to a base, right? And he did get questions that were asked outside of like, here's this index card at stand
Right.
up and ask this question. And he answered honestly on the spot
Yeah.
on a regular basis. I can't say that I know that about Chief Bass because I don't, again, I don't really follow her like that. I've never
She's
really,
also new in this seat, so it might just be. It might be. So I mean, it could be she's new in the seat. It could also be because Chief Wright saw the value of criticism
yeah,
and how to respond to that criticism. Because again, like above everything else the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force is going to do, there's two things: trust and communication. That's if you don't have those two things, you're not a good Chief Master of the Air Force. And Cody is a prime example of that.
yeah,
Did we have trust with him, and did we feel like we were heard by him? No and no.
yeah,
Like he failed like tremendously. So like Chief Wright, it might have been his PA was really in tune with that, and they're very skilled and good, and they wanted to show the critical comments and the questions and the fact that he would answer them in good faith. What that does also is it promotes the next base you go to.
yeah,
More people are going to ask these critical comments, and what you're going to get a little beat up. You're going to feel bad, but people have trust that you're going to take it and run with it because they've seen what you've done, and they know that you don't silence these things. Your supervisor's going to drag you off afterwards. Like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, how you're
yeah.
making us look.
I'm the only reason why I'm bringing it up is because I'm not very aware of any criticism and how it was handled, whether it was publicly or not. When it came to Chief Wright, I'm obviously highly aware of what's going on with Chief Bass right now. But I would just, that was just a thought in my head because I want to make sure that this isn't being approached differently. But then I also think about this, right? So the whole, you've got big shoes to fill.
Yep, that's fair.
Situation. I think that's unfair to anyone that comes behind that kind of person. You know what I mean? Like, we went from having really fucking low expectations because of Chief Cody. Then we went to having really high expectations because of Chief Wright. But we also have to talk about how fundamentally these are different individuals who have different life experiences, who have different career experiences and things like that. And so we're setting them up for failure by saying you have big shoes to fill because this is what Chief Wright did. Now,
That's fair.
She should be smart and play her cards right, knowing that, the feedback that was received because of Chief Wright and how the Air Force, we basically dubbed him, enlisted Jesus, that's a big deal. And that puts a lot of pressure on someone who's following in their footsteps. But we have to make sure that it's known that it was a torch passing.
It was.
It's not a footstep filler situation. She's not walking in the same direction, not in the same path, none of those things. She is carrying the baton forward.
Yes.
And so we have to give her the opportunity to learn. And we have to give her the opportunity to figure out whether or not, she's handling this criticism appropriately. And we also have to give her the opportunity, if it's not her, if it's her PA team, she needs to fix that shit.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
And that's the critical piece here because I don't know if she's getting
Yes.
I truly think this. And I'm going to do my utmost for this podcast to make it into her hands as an absolute courtesy of I don't know if you're getting this information and I'm going to give it to you and it's not going to be easy, but it's the truth and I have to make sure you have it because I'm not necessarily judging her against Cody as a standard or Wright as a standard.
Right.
I'm only judging her against are you building trust and are you facilitating communication?
Yes.
That's the standard I'm like looking at her at and I see deleting comments and ego protecting and messaging and I'm not saying her, I really truly think her PA team is fucking
I get that. I just find it very important to bring up the difference in criticism or how criticism is handled through previous chief master sergeants, specifically because we are looking at the position and not necessarily the individual. Because I'm going to keep saying it because I don't want anyone to think that I'm making an excuse to hyper criticize the first female chief master sergeant in the Air Force.
Yep.
Because I'm against that. But the position that we're talking about needs to remain open to criticism and feedback.
I have no predisposed notions of her suitability
Yeah.
or insuitability for the office.
Yeah.
Like it's I mean, I'm not trying to say I don't even see gender. Like that's not true. Like, but I'm saying like I just assume like I mean, there's been I'm going to talk about like Maura Johnson. Like Maura Johnson, I don't you may or may not know her, but she's a I think she might be a shirt now, which by the way, like whoever DSD'd her to shirt, fucking put a feather in your hat because that was the right call. Good job on that. She was like the glue for most units she was in. She would just bring people together. People felt comfortable talking to her. She would take care of people off duty. Like she was the heat. She was, I mean, me and her both had like surgeries at the same time. She was a little bit ahead of me and she was bringing like food over to me because I was still like hobbled and shit.
That's nice.
Like convalescing. Like she was like spot the fuck on.
Yeah.
So like if she ended up being the chief master on the Air Force someday, I'd be like, yep, that was a fucking good call. Like keep doing it.
Yeah.
But like I don't have any predisposed notions about chief. I didn't hear of her. I didn't know anything about her. Like this is a clean slate. Yeah, you have big shoes to fill, but I need action on the suicide problem as soon as possible. And also you need to build trust because nobody knows you. And you're going to carry over a little bit of trust like vicariously from the office handout from Chief Wright. He built up that sort of respect. But you need to like build trust in you and the office. And then also like you have to like welcome that noisy, much like what Vic Moore talks about. You need to welcome a noisy system.
Yeah.
And this, I think it just feels like it's not.
I think it's important too because I think she picked up on how well received Chief Wright was when he was highlighting the importance of, you know, certain career fields and highlighting the importance of, you know, showing support to the airmen that are breaking their backs. You know, they say that we're the backbone, you know, of the force and we're you know but the backbone is constantly stepped on. So I don't know, again, speculation, I don't know if she saw what was happening and how well regarded he was and then tried to carry that forward, but he also backed it up with action, except for the suicide piece.
I suspect, boy, and also it's amazing how much I don't know. So like definitely take this with a grain of salt. It's very much on the outside looking in. I suspect it was like a handoff from his PA team that he picked to her PA team that she kind of picked and said, this is all the things we've done. This is what you need to do. And so the PA team's like, yeah, you go around like when it comes like the thanking a maintainer, like when he did that thank a maintainer thing, it's because he'd already shut off course 14, course 15, and done some other things that made a maintainer's life immeasurably better.
Facts.
And then he shows like the crew chief sitting in the exhaust with a bunny suit, like looking out. And now it's like thank a maintainer. It's like it very much goes back to, in order to thank me for what I'm doing, you need to articulate what you did to make my life easier before you get to fucking thank me. So when her PA team is doing this, maintainers of the backbone of the Air Force, and look at all the things they do and they're working really hard. Okay. But if you're going to like tout the thank you for your service to maintainers, what the fuck are you doing to make the maintainer's life better?
It's got to be more than a photo op.
That works for the new maintainers, but it doesn't work for anybody that's been there like 3 or 4 years because you're like, oh, it's a pizza. It's a Friday pizza again. It's
lip service.
Here you go. We're like, okay, yeah, it's a Friday pizza, but we're chain canning PDUs every 3 weeks. I'd rather stop doing that than eat a fucking pizza. So can we like back up on the pizza and stop doing PDUs?
Yeah.
I don't know if there's anything else I want to talk about.
I just want to say, I can make this my closing statement. I just want to say that it's really important for her and her team to look at this information, see how understand why there is backlash to her social media actions or her team's social media actions. She needs to understand why it's important because of the trickle-down effect that it does have on service members and veterans alike. And then move forward, apologize, make a statement out loud like, hey, you know, you're telling me, you're making all these posts saying that you're listening to us and you're hearing our shit, you know, and our cries for help. But then something like this happens and then you're like, oh, not really.
Right.
And then I see these photo ops with a bunch of Shaw Air Force Base maintainers, which I'm glad that she did because they deserve this. Shaw Air Force Base is a meat grinder.
Yep.
And everyone here basically boomerangs. They go from Shaw to Korea, back to
Yep.
Shaw, and the whole time that they're at Shaw, they're probably going to deploy more often than they get to see their families. So I think it's important that she's doing that, but it's got to be more than a photo op. You need to see how this is having an effect and an impact on your social media account and what other people might think of because of this, because that may or may not hinder the communication and the trust between your office and the people that you are supposed to be working for.
Yep.
So I hope that if she does hear this, or someone from her PA team, or someone, whoever who does hear this podcast, knows this is not about whether or not we like her. This is about how what she or her team or her PA team are doing, and what that means ultimately in the long run. Because if you keep shutting people down the way that she's shutting them down for things that honestly they shouldn't be shut down for, then who's going to want to talk to her and tell her the truth about what's going on in this world?
Yeah, and that's a big piece too. That's a good point. If you look at the Bass or Bass thing, and you look at Rick Rynearson saying, I wish we focus more on the mission like the other services instead of turning into the care force. That is not the worst criticism you're going to fucking get. And the fact that you're stomping all over that means you're never going to get the important criticism.
Yeah.
And that's not to say Rick's comment isn't important, but there are more important things. And when, like, you can bet right now that after the Bass or Bass thing, there is not a fucking person active duty in the Air Force that's going to go on our page and disagree with her.
Yeah.
You're just not, right?
Yeah.
And then, you shut off all of that. And now, and for what?
Yeah.
For Bass or Bass?
Yeah.
Like that was the hill you died on.
Yeah.
To shut off real honest feedback from the field was that. And then you're gonna block and ban this guy, which, by the way, like, again, I'm certainly not a legal scholar, but like his case is probably gonna fucking win.
Yeah.
So like it's not like,
because there's precedent for it.
There's everywhere, right? So it's like, not only did you shut off communication with the active duty, now you're also trying to block dissenters that have a good frame of reference in the military that don't agree with how things are going. You banned and blocked them, and then you're going to get a suit, which, by the way, there's no fucking chance the Air Force Times and national media isn't going to pick up that the Chief Master Sergeant in the Air Force is being sued for a violation of somebody's constitutional rights.
Right.
So now, what is your legacy? Like, seriously, what do you want your fucking legacy to be?
Yeah.
Do you want your legacy to be that you controlled the microcosm of your Facebook page? Which, because by the way, the actions you took on your Facebook page isn't going to fix the misogyny and the racism and the sexism and the classism and all the other isms that are going in all the other fucking groups.
Yeah.
It didn't fix that.
Nope.
It just moved it, right? But do you really want your legacy to be that you hammered a kid for saying Bass or Bass, and then you got sued for a First Amendment violation? And even if he loses, it's still gonna detract from you. It's gonna take time and resources to handle. It's going to be fucking embarrassing, especially when the national media gets wind of the fact that you or your team somehow thought that you had the right to restrict all speech from all people at all times for any reason without notice.
Yeah.
Like, that alone is going to be captured and be like, what the fuck's going on? But the reality is, when you're out of the Air Force, go look at Chief Cody's Wikipedia page, because every so often people will edit and say the worst Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, and then somebody comes in and fixes it. But like, is that really what you want to be known for, of policing thought on just your page and not the internet at large? And if that's what you want your legacy to be, well, I guess your team's doing a great job and press on with pride. I suspect that it's not.
They'd be better off having a conversation to figure out how and why they feel that way, and then, like, the one conversation that I believe was productive in that comment chain, there was one productive conversation in there, and if they would have taken the time to have that conversation with him, you know what I mean? You had an opportunity to educate someone. You had an opportunity to educate everyone else that's on this comment thread and sees it. And what you did instead was delete them and then block them from commenting.
Yes.
It doesn't make any sense. And then the one person who actually made, it's very obvious that it was a threat, veiled, but still a threat. And he's still on the page. And that doesn't make any sense to me.
It doesn't. And again, I very much suspect that Chief Master Sergeant had no idea this was going on.
Yeah, I think that conversation needs to be had between her PA team and her. And if it is her, because I'm not going to sit here and say that it's not, because we don't know. But if it is her, she's got work to do. If it's her PA team, she's got work to do.
That's pretty fucking spot on.
Period.
I give you that. Yep.
Like that's where it's at.
Okay. Well, Ashley, man, you are just a fucking wealth. I'm dead serious. I love having you on. I thoroughly like a lot of people don't know this. I don't think I've talked about it before. Like I met Ashley for the first time in like June or something, right?
Yeah, it was a while back.
Yeah, like the first video you saw with Ashley for Women in Maintenance is because I was looking for women maintainers and I just wanted to get her on the panel. So I also want to thank Ashley. Like that took a lot of trust for her to come on for that topic in particular with me, a stranger. Now, in fairness, she got to like read my blog and like see some of my videos.
Yeah.
So she at least knew where I was coming from, which is good,
It helped.
I guess. But like that's a pretty like I wasn't talking about like troubleshooting, which is a very kind of like dispassionate sort of topic. Like I was talking about your experiences as a woman in maintenance. So I want to thank you for that. And I certainly want to thank you for all the times you came on. If there's something you want to talk about, you're welcome to shoot me a text and be like, hey, can we do a podcast on whatever this is? I'm like, well, let's fucking figure out a time and fire it up. Let's do it.
Yeah, I'm already working on that.
So, okay. All right. So thank you for, I mean, and also again, like this is like a labor of love, these sorts of things where we get to be the voice for the people in the field because they don't have a voice, and we're out of the military, so we're a little bit removed. So if we're wrong, please comment and let us know when we're off base. But if we're right, let us know as well so we can keep amplifying whatever the issues are. But I consider it like an honor to be involved in the process of speaking for the force and really letting people know what's going on. And I certainly know Ashley does because we talk about it offline like constantly. It's very generous the time you give for this, and I really
I live for it, and you're right. Like I appreciate you letting me come onto your show because of that, because you could tell what I was trying to do on my page, and I have been trying to get maintainers to understand a lot of the things that because most of my friends are maintainers, trying to understand some of the things that their colorful counterparts are experiencing something different or whatever. And so I appreciate you being able to let me give voice to other marginalized peoples as well, because they do appreciate the work that you and I have been doing to talk about a lot of the issues within the maintenance community, the Air Force community. And then I'm getting a little bit more traction on my page because I'm on your page. And
which also like plug for Ashley's page, like the Diary of a Mixed Woman. She's writing blogs and she's doing videos, and she's here all the time. So if you listen to these podcasts, you're like, damn, she's really smart. Well, imagine how smart she is when she's not restricted to talking about the Air Force.
And I also just want to say thank you all to the Patreon subscribers for this microphone again, because my microphone voice is very attractive.
So that's interesting because Rick just became a Patreon subscriber. So he indirectly paid for your microphone.
Thanks,
for us
Rick.
to call him an asshole, which I thoroughly enjoy that we did that.
Thanks, Rick.
Okay. All right. All right. That's it. Thanks, everybody. Adios.